Today, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I am representing here the category of the further participants. What is the role of the nuclear energy in the solution of climate change? I would like to talk about the climate change, and this aspect. Climatic change is one of the most urgent problems the humanity is facing. It's not from our report, this is the report by the Czech National Bank, issued in May 2024. This is the first sentence, which is introducing the article Impacts of Climatic Changes on the Monetary Policy. So, the estimate of needed finance for stopping the worst impacts of the climatic change is roughly 4.3 billion annually. So this is the data taken from the UNO. In the Czech Republic, the impact of climatic changes should be in 2050 roughly 5 times, well, by 1/5 it would be higher, now it is 9%. What do we need? As the Czech National Bank is talking about, the first is decarbonization of cheap, accessible, low-emission sources for the Czech economy to be competitive. So socially sensitive transformation of all the sectors producing CO2 emissions from the fossil fuels, because we would like to preserve the purchasing power and the standard living standard of this country. And of course, all the damages of environment are connected with costs. I would like to mention one study dedicated to the costs of clean and cheap energy. This is a study published by Partners about the optimum. And you can see 2 interesting questions there. Which steps lead to low energy costs in the long term in the Czech Republic? And the second one is energy saving. So the conclusions of the study are very interesting. On the left-hand side, you can see the highest savings can be achieved if you develop wind energy. But we have also photovoltaic there, and energy savings, which play a very important role. And the third is important. The third important aspect is interlinkage within Europe. So, development of the wind energy. It is on the left-hand side. This is the column. This is the wind and sun energy savings, and also interconnection of Europe. And the gray one means savings, but also high costs. And nobody will be surprised that the key factor which will deciding how the nuclear energy will be reflected in the energy prices is here. So there's an interesting model here. These are some facts about the climate, then the nuclear reactors number, interconnections. When you are looking at the X x-axis, so there are no nuclear blocks. This is 1 here, 2, and there are 4 here. And the modeling showed us that the variant of 1 or 2 new nuclear reactors has only small perspectives, and these 3 and 4 blocks can be prolonged. The basic thing here is taking care about these scenarios in the high probability, so they can lead also to adding additional blocks. But after 2030, we should know how the integration of Europe and wind energy will reflect themselves in the energy sector of Europe. And we will know about the potentials. So it's not very easy to introduce our process from the application to the erecting. This process is very long, and sometimes we have a so-called NIMBY effect, because some government negotiations are playing a role in it. They can accelerate it or slow down. And if this process is not successful, so other erections can be discussed. This modeling is concluded the 3 nuclear blocks, but this modeling is not finalized. But the government is considering 4 reactors. It's necessary to take into account also CO2 emissions and accumulation in the atmosphere, and this decarbonization is linked to the use and production and generation of energy. You can see that here. You can see CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour. You can see it, there's a comparison. Which each of the sources is producing CO2 grams per kilowatt hour. The dirtiest one is coal combustion and gas combustion. And when we compared it with windmill, which can be installed in the Czech Republic, this is a wind onshore energy. So when we compare it, so we can see that nuclear sources are 3 times higher. And when you take into account the whole service life of these power plants, it means taking into account the uranium mining, enrichment, and other processes. So the mathematics is much worse with the nuclear power plants. I would like to mention something as for something media is talking about, because environmental problems are not going out of the way of anybody. Operation of nuclear power plants is associated with this fact. So, for example, it can influence climatic changes, and nuclear power plant Temelin is evaporating every year 35 million cubic meters water, which means 5 or 6 times higher than the whole volume of the Rosenberg pond. This is water which is disappearing from the landscape. This would be a part of some cycles normally, but this time it is coming into the atmosphere and ends somewhere outside the Czech border. Safety. Of course, nuclear power plants are influenced by climate changes. For example, in France 2 years ago, 4 nuclear plants were closed down, or reactors were closed down, because they influenced the amount of water in rivers. Then there are other cases here. For example, in the USA, there's something like flooding. We saw something similar in Fukushima as an effect or consequence of tsunami. And we can also mention the situation which is developing since 2022, and this is the role of nuclear power plants in war conflicts, for example, in the Ukraine. And then we have unstable political systems, and there is a risk of further development of nuclear power plants, because it's associated with the risk of developing nuclear weapons. Conclusion or summary. I think there is a sort of renaissance of nuclear energy, but it's something like a aspect which is influencing climate changes. There are certain declarations from the group of 20 countries, including the Czech Republic, that they will increase the energy from nuclear sources by the factor of 3. But it's not realistic, because the nuclear is just providing 10% of electricity in the world, and all the studies dedicated to climate change say that it's necessary to take steps from the point of view of safety, and also as for the nuclear risks. So these decisions have to be made within the next decade. But nevertheless, we can't live without nuclear energy. When I was at the COP conference 28 in Dubai, so Czech Republic has declared themselves a part of the group of 20 countries, which was headed by the France. And but I think the increase of the nuclear energy sources by the factor of 3 is not realistic, because it's linked to other challenges which are over here. When we have a look at some real facts, so if we can imagine such a large increase, so we have to ask which risks are associated there. This is a risk of political system. There can be some misuse of these investments, and how to focus, how to develop further on. And so if in 2020 the first kickoff will start and building will start, so it's not realistic to expect the reactor to be built in 7 years. Maybe in China, but we are not in China. Another aspect, the state which is prepared to invest into nuclear energy has to be a very strong state to have enough money for the investment, because we are thinking, where are the private investors? They are not in this country, and they are not here because it doesn't pay for them. So the government must be strong enough to pay for the investment and guarantee a safe operation of these nuclear power plants, because the money coming into the funds are lower than necessary. And in the end, the government, for example, Germany, is just expecting to stop the large power plants operation. And it seems that France is prepared themselves to invest into small reactors because they are not able to invest into large ones. So we'll see the account for it, or the performance of the budget in 2040. But take into account the example of the USA, so we have to accept that we will pay for it as consumers, no matter what the power plant is producing and how it performs. The study shows, as for that climate changes and the risks associated with the erection of one block, I think that this is a risk most politicians can imagine. When we add another 2 blocks or reactors, and when we take into account some smaller modular reactors, so for another 3,000 megawatt hours, so the risk is multiplied. My conclusion is that fighting the climatic change, if we have just 10, 15 years to make a decision, so we have to focus on the low-hanging fruit and invest into the renewable sources of energy, into savings and interconnection of Europe, so that we as a Czech Republic can be a part of a larger system. It's very difficult to hear it because we like being independent and self-sufficient in the crisis. But of course, the fact is that we have some small extraction of oil and gas, but it's not sufficient for supplying us. And as for the coal, the mining, it will be uncompetitive. So we haven't got any uranium mining, we are not doing enrichment of uranium. So we are dependent on sources from abroad. And from a point of view, it's much more convenient to be dependent on decentralized systems of people who are setting up communities, are regulating and controlling their consumption, then taking into account big players which are following their own purpose. And I think that it doesn't make much more sense to erect 4 new reactors. It's rather better to prolong the service life of the existing nuclear power plants. Thank you.